We are starting off the week in fine fashion here at the Voice of College Football. We'll tell you why here in just a second. This is the College Football Show, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, typically, but we moved the time today just to accommodate a special guest. And we know that, of course, Deion Sanders is calling a press conference here in a few minutes. We will get to that news a little bit later. But anytime you can get the industry standard, the gold standard of all of college football preview magazines, and the author, the founder, the guy that makes it all happen and started this entire industry to a certain extent, Phil Steele on. It's always an honor and pleasure. Phil, appreciate you being here, sir.
Hey, always good to talk to you, Mark. Always enjoy our conversations, my friend.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. But if you recall our conversations from the past, I do love to give the viewers and myself an insight into how the donuts are made. But in addition to just letting us know the volume of work that goes into this and the process, the added strain of the transfer portal in recent years and what that has done to your deadlines.
Yeah, Mark, it's a 7-month process to put this thing out. I start the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Some team seasons are complete. I read through every article that was written about the team through the entire year, and then I do my first write-through. The first write-through is, what kind of shape was this position coming into last year? What happened last year? What do I think is going to happen with this position next year? Now, the first two parts of that aren't going to change. But the third part changes probably 3 times during the course of the magazine process. The second write-through is in the spring. Once we get the rosters updated, we've added the freshmen, added all the transfer portal moves that happened in the winter, rewrite the ending part of each one, and update all my power ratings, get it ready. The third part's after talking to the head coaches. And it used to be, Mark, that I could talk to head coaches beginning even in March when spring practice was over. They had their exit interviews, and I could go over the roster with them. Now I have to wait till the spring portal is closed, which is the end of April. So basically, I'm trying to fit 136 head coaches. Each call takes about an hour apiece, trying to get them all in the month of May. It actually dragged into June this year, made it a lot more hectic down the stretch. But the good news is we give the 5 weeks after the transfer portal's closed. So we've got all the players on the right teams, everybody that signed, basically anybody that was worth something signed in those 5 weeks, and we've got that all set. There were a couple of typos in this year's magazine due to the stressful month of May and the start of June. And we'll either in the future, if we can go to one transfer portal, great. If it's still 2 transfer portals, we may even have to move back the date another week to get this thing to the press.
Well, the volume of information is just incomprehensible, folks. So if you're not aware, it's not too late to grab a copy, and we'll let you know a little bit later after Phil's appearance how you can go online and get yourself a copy. And then you can get an updated version as well as the certain situations around college football change. What I really appreciated about it, Phil, in addition to the sheer volume of information, that actually, when you go through every team's analysis, it not only talks about 2025, but it gives you a great impression going back as much as like 3 years to like 2022, 23 at each position group, to let us know how did we reach this point. And how has that position group fared over the last few years? Not just what is the projection this year, but it gives a well-rounded view on that position group. So it's just phenomenal, not just the volume of information, but everything's put into perspective. And again, like you differentiate. Sometimes we will find position rankings online, and you really don't know what kind of angle this particular outlet's going for in position rankings or player rankings, but you break it down. Draft eligible players, meaning for the NFL draft, this is their pro potential, where we project them to be in a position toward the NFL draft next year, versus for college football this year, these are the best players. This is how I rank them. So again, just not the volume of information, but the way it's so smartly put together and well thought out is tremendous. So Phil, I would love to hit you up on some maybe lightning rod type of teams for this year. And we'll just kind of go down your impressions. And I'd like to remind you, if you recall our conversations from the past, I hit you with this number a few years ago, that I've been tracking plus or minus 3 teams, meaning what teams from season to season, how many teams in college football either add 3 wins or decrease 3 wins from the previous season. Because in receiving calls here at the Voice for College Football, I ask fans, and I'll ask them, how many teams out of the power conferences, the 70 teams there, do you think have that much of an increase or decrease in wins from one season to the next, from let's say 6-6 to 9-3, or from 3-9 to 6-6? And we just have a conservative outlook of how much these seasons change from year to year, but it's really volatile. And this past season, Phil, from 2023 to 2024, 29 of the 70 had at least a 3-win increase or decrease from the previous season. So there's a lot of volatility in the sport once you get past the few elites. So let's start with Penn State, because if it's all going to happen, it seems as though it's going to happen this year for this team. Not that they didn't lose guys like Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter, but just your overall thoughts about Penn State, because you seem to be about as high as everybody else is on the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, love your research, by the way, Mark. And of those 29 teams, we're all 16 Big 12 teams in there? Because
exactly.
Last year, the Big 12 was the most volatile conference I have covered in the 31 years of the magazine. Everybody at the bottom finished at the top. Everybody at the top finished at the bottom. Do you think it was all 16?
I think it was 10 out of 16.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Kansas State is pretty much a stalemate. They're a constant, but everybody else was topsy-turvy.
I love it. I love it. I love those type of numbers, Mark. Appreciate you doing that research. Let's talk about Penn State, though, and why I'm so high on them. For the first time in the 31 years of the magazine, I picked them number 1 this year. And you go back to the formula of the last 2 national champs, Ohio State and Michigan. 2 years ago, Michigan had a lot of players turn down the NFL and opted to return. They were a senior-laden group, a homegrown group. And that's something I'm going to discuss a couple times with you, I'm sure, during this interview, Mark, is that I put an emphasis on homegrown teams, meaning those teams that are churning 60 players in every year and 60 players out each year. I think it's tough to build the cohesion. Meanwhile, you take a look at last year's successful teams. Clemson won the ACC. Iowa State, very little churn. They were in the Big 12 title game. Army and Navy had unexpectedly great seasons. They don't use the transfer portal. So I do put an emphasis on that this year. And with Penn State, yes, they added for some portal guys like Kyron Hudson at wide receiver from USC, Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Devontae Ross from Troy. That was probably their one specific area of need. But other than that, this is a homegrown team. And a lot of these guys turned down the NFL. Danny Dennis Sutton at defensive end, Zane Durant, defensive tackle. Heck, Drew Allar would have been a first-round draft pick last year. Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen. I could go on and on. It's a senior-laden team. It's a homegrown team, and they've got a lot of players that turned down the NFL. Now, I rate them the number 1 running back core in the country, the number 1 offensive line in the country. Of all the main contenders, they're one of the few that return a starting quarterback like Drew Allar, and then defensively, one of the top defenses in the country. So they really have everything going for them, including special teams, which I rate number 20, top 25. They do have to play Ohio State on the road, but as we saw in the last year, Ohio State didn't beat Michigan. They didn't win the Big Ten, but once they got to the playoff, the best team won it all. I got Penn State as the most talented team in the country this year and winning it all.
Phil Steele with us, of course, is the premier college football publication each and every year. It's not too late to get out there and grab it, Barnes & Noble, or just jump online, and we'll tell you a little bit later how to do that. I want to keep in mind also, everyone, that in a time frame of the last 6 years, the last 13 years, the last 30 years, covering the most prestigious 18 publications, Phil Steele's has been the most accurate in its predictions and projections. All right. How about Indiana as we stay in the Big Ten? I think it's just an automatic default that everybody thinks there's no way that they can repeat what they did last year, obviously with more difficult schedule. But when you go layer by layer, and I certainly have diced up all of these teams mostly through your research, Indiana bringing back excellent players on defense and an offensive line that's been a bit retooled and seems to be fortified. And of course, a new quarterback from Cal.
Yeah, when I looked at Indiana, probably my first blush reaction, Mark, was exactly what you just said. They can't match what they did last year. There's going to be a regression. But actually going through the team with Coach Cignetti, I actually feel this year's team has a little more talent than last year's did. Now, quarterback, it's going to be tough to replace what Curtis Rourke did last year. I mean, he had 29 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions, third down, he was almost automatic. But I like Fernando Mendoza coming in from Cal. He had an underrated type of year. In fact, Cal was a team that had so many close losses. They were a couple plays away from being 9-0 at one point last year. I like the addition of Roman Hemby from Maryland at running back. They've got their top 2 receivers back from last year, as you mentioned. They've added to the offensive line, had some veterans coming back as well. Defensively, getting Mikhail Kamara and Aiden Fisher back, and D'Angelo Pounds playing a defensive line linebacker and cornerback respectively. This is a loaded defense, so I like the overall talent. Now, here's the key. Their schedule's a little bit tougher than last year. They play Illinois week 4, and that's basically a playoff elimination game, I think. I believe 4 teams from the Big Ten will make the playoff. The Illinois-Indiana winner stays alive. The loser probably drops off a little bit. They do have to play Oregon on the road. They play Penn State on the road. And they play Iowa on the road. So those are 3 pretty tough road games. Last year, they did have to play Ohio State on the road, but the other road games were all against teams that had losing records in the Big Ten. So maybe a little more talent, but a tougher schedule. If they can knock off Illinois, they've got a shot at getting back to the playoff.
Phil, you brought up your conversation with Kurt Signetti, which, for one thing, I would love to hear, because the guy, every time he opens his mouth up, it seems to draw attention one way or the other, for one thing. Number 2, just the coaches' conversations in general. I would think on the surface that, they're just going to tell you what they want you to know in regards to every group is developing and we feel good about every unit. But what do you really gain out of those coaches' conversations?
Well, it's huge, Mark. And I think it's different than when most people interview a coach. I send them my 2 full pages. It's got every single player on their team, every single note I have on every player, and I have my opinions on them. And what I do to the coaches is we go through every player on the team. I say, put me in order at the position. Tell me a little something about the guys that are going to see the field. Then give me an overall wrap up at the position. And they know I've got a good memory. So if they're all of a sudden one season saying everybody's an all-star, everybody's this, I'm going to call them up on that the next year. And so if a coach is lowballing his players, I'll call them up on that the next year. I'll be like, hey, you let's talk about this guy. So they know I got a good memory. They know I've got all these notes on the individual players. And let me give you an example. Mike Elko, Texas A&M. Last year, when I talked to him about his offensive line, we went over it. He goes, Phil, we're middle of the pack in the SEC this year. This year, when I talked to him about the offensive line, I said, Phil, we're not only at the top of the line of the SEC, I think we have a Joe Moore Award contender on the offensive line. So those type of conversations, I think, are invaluable. And one of the reasons that we are the most accurate magazine, first of all, I work more hours than anybody else. That's all I work on is college football. So we better be the most accurate. And the second is, I don't think there's anybody else in the country that talks to 125 plus of the head coaches each and every year.
Absolutely. It's just amazing what you're able to put together. And again, it's something that, I attempt to read cover to cover. I don't probably quite get through it. Maybe Georgia Southern slips through the cracks or somebody like that. But then it becomes a reference guide for the rest of the season, folks. You just keep it right by you during your entire college football day, as I do, because I'll be like, I remember something about that guy. And I'll be like, that outside linebacker for Vanderbilt. Yeah. And I'll be able to find him in the listings. And it's just phenomenal what Phil Steele brings to us. Again, 30 plus years of being at the top of the industry. USC, I went into last season, Phil, saying, okay, I've got them at 8-4. We've got a USC channel. They weren't too happy with me over there, but I had them at 8-4. So I actually overestimated them. But I did feel that this was the highest ceiling, lowest floor team combination in the Big Ten. And then they went out there and kind of proved it by losing to the likes of Maryland, but also giving Penn State its toughest game of the season in a loss in overtime, beating Texas A&M and LSU. So when they put it together, they put it together. But what are your thoughts about USC?
I've got them my number 5 surprise team in the country this year, Mark, and watching their games last year. And I brought this up to Coach Riley, and coaches are hesitant to make excuses or anything like that. But I told him I watched USC football, and you look at their losses last year. Go back to that Michigan game. Remember, it's the fourth quarter, USC's leading, and then Mullins breaks off that long run. And then on 4th and goal, Michigan scores a touchdown. Had they were one play away, not give up that long run, not give up 4th and goal. I could go back throughout the game. They would have beaten Michigan. You go back to the Penn State game, as you mentioned, they led almost start to finish against Penn State. They lost the thing in overtime. You go back to the Maryland game. They're up by 6, kicking the game-clinching field goal. It gets blocked, return to midfield. Maryland scores a touchdown in the final seconds and beats them. The Washington game, twice they got stopped on downs inside the 10-yard line, ended up losing by 5. Yeah, heck, even the Notre Dame game, if you go back and look at that, they gave up 2 99-yard defensive touchdowns. That's 2 14-point swings in one game, and they lost by 14. There was a point prior to the Notre Dame game where I thought they were 5 plays away from being 11-0, so they were not far away from being that talented team. I love the addition last year of their defense coordinator, Danton Lynn. I think he's one of the best in the country. And this may be Lincoln Riley's best defense he's put on the field. He's been known for offense. This may be his best defense. Offensively, I like the way that they came along with Maeva at quarterback late in the year. They've got a veteran offensive line that behind them, and the receiving core looks solid. And when you look at the schedule this year, they do have to play Illinois, Notre Dame, Oregon on the road, but those are the only 3 games I have them a true underdog in, and most of them only a slight underdog. A surprise team is a team that not top 10, nobody's top 10, that I think has a shot of making the playoff. I think if there is breaks go their way this year as opposed to last year, you might see USC up there contending for the Big Ten.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on USC being a surprise. I was asked the other day, surprise teams, and I picked them off immediately, along with Texas A&M and a few other teams. Phil, as I look at Ohio State and Michigan on my list, I'm thinking, when is the last time we had this many what are supposed to be elite teams going into this season with new young quarterbacks who have no experience, meaning Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, that many teams, Alabama, that are going to be playing inexperienced quarterbacks.
Yeah, not only inexperienced quarterbacks, but the majority of those teams also inexperienced offensive lines. Part of the reason that I pushed a Penn State and a Clemson to the top, veteran offensive lines, veteran quarterbacks, 2 things that I really value coming into the year. Now, last year, Mark, we saw a national champ, Michigan, lose a lot of players the NFL draft, 14, 15 players. What happened to them? They were 6-5 heading to Ohio State as a double-digit underdog on the verge of a losing season. And now Ohio State just lost 14 draft picks, but no, that's the drop-off's not going to happen. Ohio State doesn't have that type of schedule that Michigan did, and they've got more talent coming back this year, including their wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, and defensive back, Caleb Downs. So when you look at the schedule, they could actually be favored in all 12 games this year. Their toughest 2 games are Texas, Penn State. They get them both at home. They do play Michigan on the road. Can they ever beat Michigan? It used to be Michigan couldn't beat Ohio State. Now the tables have turned in that one. But I think overall you'll see Ohio State have a decent year. But I agree with you 100%, Mark. You look at the top, there's a lot of teams replacing their quarterback. And Notre Dame, Texas, a couple of big names along with Ohio State.
Our buddy Jackson left a comment about Oklahoma in the chat, and they were on my list as well because I really think that Oklahoma is going to bounce back. I'm intrigued to see what John Mateer offers because he's not fared well in a couple appearances against power conference defenses, but I think after a 44 touchdown season last year that he's ready to roll. And of course, Jaden Ott was one of the best backs in college football in 2023, but the schedule again is brutal for Oklahoma.
Yeah, and when I look at Oklahoma, they are my number 1 surprise team, Mark. I think they have an excellent shot of making the playoff this year. And you go back to last year, they had a brutal schedule. But their brutal schedule last year, they only had 3 SEC home games last year. And so that hurt their overall team. And then, of course, the fact that the offense had 0 returning starters on the offensive line. And then they had a receiving core that lost their top 5 receivers due to injury. Now, I'm going to take you to Clemson just for a minute. Clemson 2 years ago, Cade Klubnik had a banged-up, injury-plagued receiving core. All his top guys were out. This year, he got those injured players back. They added in a couple of true frosh, last year. And he went from a 19-9 ratio in 2023 to a 36-6 ratio last year. It shows what you can do with a good receiving core. Well, Oklahoma's receiving core last year had lost their top 5 guys. They got those injured guys back, like Burks, Deion Burks, who I think is an NFL prospect. Plus, they've added some things. They go from a weakness to a strength at receiver. Same thing on the offensive line. They go from 0 returning starters to a veteran unit. You touched on Jaden Ott, who was banged up last year. That's why he didn't have a big year, but I think he returns to that 2023 form. And then Matera gives you the mobility of the legs as well as the arm, and he has it comfortable with the system. They bring it in as offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle. Nothing wrong with that Oklahoma defense, even against that brutal schedule last year. Held opponents to 87 yards per game below their average, number 6 in the country. Venables has one of those defenses, and I got to tell you, Mark, when I hung up the phone with Coach Venables, I'm like, damn, that's a playoff roster right there. I think with the improved offense, the excellent defense, and while the schedule's brutal, it's more manageable. They only have 3 true SEC road games this year. They get Michigan at home. They get Ole Miss at home. They get Missouri at home. So a better schedule, much improved offense, same solid defense. I think they've got a shot at making the playoff.
Yeah, I have yet to put my projected records for all these teams into the grinder to spit out who would make the playoffs, but I've got Oklahoma at 9-3, and I think with that schedule, that as long as those were not blowout losses, would probably get the first consideration or one of the top 2 or 3 considerations as a 9-3 team to possibly make the playoffs. And it's on a scheduling note, Phil, I did a breakdown of the Oklahoma versus Texas schedules going into SEC play. Their first years in 2024, Oklahoma was playing SEC schedules that had a 65 winning percentage, and Texas was playing a 35 winning percentage. And it actually played out almost to the T like those teams had fared the previous year. So now, as you well know, the SEC schedule is exactly the same. They're just playing in the opposite location as they did their opponents last year. So it appears as though Oklahoma is going to have just as much of a difficult grind through the SEC as they did the last season versus what Texas is going to experience.
Yeah, and that I noted prior to last year. And you got to wonder what Oklahoma and Texas's records would have been last year had the schedules been reversed.
Absolutely. Phil, a lot of people high on LSU. Of course, Brian Kelly's been there, not failing, but maybe not meeting expectations. Of course, he was hired to win championships there, went to the SEC title game his first year. It's been a lot of 10-3, 9-4 since then. A lot of people are high on LSU. What do you think are the key components to the Tigers contending?
The keys are going to be how quickly all these transfer portal guys acclimate and become a team, because they hit the portal hard, brought in a ton of players. How quickly will they develop? And really, to me, the biggest question mark I have on the entire team is the offensive line. Well, the offensive defensive lines, they both lose almost everybody. A lot of folks look at the skill players. I mean, Nussmeier, first team SEC, threw for 4,000 yards last year. Tremendous year. He's got the receiving core. I love the fact that Chris Hilton is now 100% healthy. Teamed with Berry and Brown. They're dangerous. Defensively, they got star power with Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins. And they brought in a ton of talent in the secondary. But how are the offensive and defensive lines going to do? Just one starter back. And then you look at their schedule. There'll be an underdog at Clemson. There'll be an underdog at Bama. I've got them an underdog at Oklahoma. And then so those are 3 tough games. They also host Florida. They play at Ole Miss. Those are a couple of tough games this year. How quickly this team acclimates. And I'm going to do a blog on philsteele.com later in the week, Mark, which is going to be about homegrown teams. And I think that the homegrown teams, the one that don't rely on transfer portal players as much, are going to have more success, much like Clemson, Iowa State, Army, Navy did last year. I'll have that up probably Friday on philsteele.com.
Excellent. We'll be looking out for that. You brought up your conversation, Phil, earlier with Mike Elko, who I consider to be the best coaching hire in college football this previous offseason. And a lot of people just look at the 8-5 record. And we got to recall that obviously this team headed down the stretch at 7-1 at one point, and even had the ball at the 1-yard line of Texas, trailing by 10 with about 4 to 5 minutes left. If they push that in to make it 17-14, then maybe we've got a game and they're going to the SEC championship game. That's how close that 8-5 season was to a possible college football playoff. So what are your thoughts on the Aggies?
Yeah, and I think even if you look at like their loss to Auburn, which came in 4 overtimes, that's a game. And that was with Texas on deck. It was basically a meaningless game for them. Didn't matter what they did against Auburn. They'd go to the SEC title game by beating Texas. And I think they are dangerous. Elko has outperformed my expectations all 3 years. as a head coach. He's actually going to call the plays on the defense this year. Remember 4 years ago when he was the defense coordinator at Texas A&M, they allowed 15.9 points per game. And what he did with Duke's defenses, amazing for the talent they had to play like they did. So you know the defense is in good hands. Offensively, a lot depends on Marcel Reed. Now, Reed took a couple teams by surprise last year. He was a surprise starter against Florida and then took LSU by surprise, I think, in the second half. Won't catch anybody by surprise this year, but he's bigger, stronger, faster, and I think he'll be able to hold up to it. They've got, as mentioned, one of the best offensive lines out there. I'm going to take Coach Elko's word on that. And running back core, Moss, Owens, Daniels, each of those guys could be a feature running back. They're loaded there. So I think talent-wise, A&M is there. When you look at their schedule this year, they do have to play, Notre Dame on the road, LSU on the road, and Texas on the road. But they are my number 2 surprise team. I think just like last year, they've got a shot at making the SEC title game and making the playoff.
Phil, Florida State is certainly a curious situation in that we're working on a 6th season for Mike Norvell, and I really can't get a handle on, has he built a program there? He's had success, and obviously 2023 was the pinnacle of that, but it's been done through the transfer portal and not the traditional great Florida State type recruiting classes out of high school, and I just don't know if he can continue that trend. But based on what they've done at the coordinator spot, as you've highlighted with some other teams, with Gus Malzahn and Tony White coming in from Nebraska, it'll be interesting to see if they can turn it around.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a much improved team this year. And, going back to my homegrown thing, they had all these transfers. They hit home runs, both 22 and 23. In fact, went undefeated in 23. Last year, they had basically a brand new team, completely recycled team. So you don't have any carryover from the previous year, very little, in fact. And then when things start to go sour with a team full of transfers, look what happened to Florida State. Second half of their season was bad. A lot of those kids are probably like, hey, where am I going to go next year? And the thing I'm hearing from coaches is players are being contacted during the season, which they really got to get rid of that. Anyway, I digress. But I think he did a better job in the portal this year, as long as they get good quarterback play out of Castellanos. And I think he fits the system well. He's more of a Gus Malzahn type of quarterback than he fit last year's system. I think they will be a much improved team. Now, are they going to be a contender in the ACC? I would put Georgia Tech, Miami of Florida, SMU, and definitely Clemson all ahead of them. But I think you'll see a much improved Florida State team. And provided things don't go south early, maybe this team sticks together at the end of the year.
Phil, we started our conversation and you quipped about the Big 12, but it is phenomenal that an Arizona State team that was 3-9, 3-9, then wins a championship. The previous year, West Virginia was the final pick of the media to finish last in the Big 12, and they went 9-4 against a pretty soft schedule. So here we are going into this season. I'm pretty sure Kansas State's strong. And other than that, I see you have Utah and Baylor actually ascending to the top of the list. But we've got a situation going on pretty much as we speak with Deion Sanders. And I don't know what he's going to announce today, whether that's just going to be him just flat out stepping down, or it's going to be compromise to his schedule, or what that's going to be. But I just want to task you with, how do you approach these situations? I know that in addition to the magazine that you release, that you have updates coming out on a continual basis. So how will you approach this situation in particular?
Well, we'll see what happens. I think the announcement from what I'm seeing is that he's cancer free, which is great. God bless him.
Okay.
Greatly appreciate that. And if that's
Amen.
the case, he'll remain as the head coach and nothing will change. I got to tell you, when I did the Big 12 this year, Mark, I looked at schedule, because if you take the top 7 teams, Baylor, Utah, Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, TCU, I think all 7 of those teams have a great shot at winning the Big 12. So to me, it came down to schedule. And you take a look at a team like Texas Tech, which hit the portal hard. They have to play Utah, Arizona State, and Kansas State all on the road. Meanwhile, you take a look at a team like Baylor, their road schedule is Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, Arizona, TCU. They get the toughest games at home. So I really went with who's got the best schedule. And what we talked about with Texas and Oklahoma, who's got the best schedule? And that's Baylor, Utah, and Iowa State. And the toughest schedules of the Big 12 are Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, which is why I picked them in a tie for 4th, even though talent-wise, they're right there with the other teams.
And the Devin Dampier move, of course, as a transfer quarterback, as a first-team Mountain West, all Mountain West Conference performer, could turn out to be huge for Utah and maybe an undervalued pickup this offseason. Phil, we appreciate you stopping by. Of course, we always look forward to the discussion each and every summer. And again, folks, it's not too late to pick up Phil Steele's publication. It is the premier edition in the plethora of preseason publications that come out. Phil, it's great talking to you as always. Hope to have you back sometime.
Mark, let's do it again in August, because it sounds like we could have talked about a lot of other teams that we didn't get to today. So let's do that. I enjoy our conversations greatly. Let's do another time here in August and bang out a bunch of more teams for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Phil. Have a great day.
All right, Mark, have a good one. Thank you.
The one and only Phil Steele. And again, this sits on this desk all the time. What's coming out of my head is between these ears. But in terms of preview videos, prediction videos, I double check everything with Phil Steele. What can I say? So a great reference point for all of us. All right. So the news is out concerning Deion Sanders, and I didn't catch up with that during our conversation, but as Phil has let us know, and we will check this out online, and I want to get this verified, what Deion Sanders has announced today, because it sounds like it is good news concerning his health status. So regardless of what you think of Deion Sanders, if you're human, then that is phenomenal news to hear. I am so glad to hear that. All right. We will take your calls here at the Voice of College Football. We have moved the regular 4 p.m. Eastern time show on this Monday to right now. Also, keep in mind, Wednesday and Thursday, I don't believe we're going to make it. I've got some company coming in from out of town. So Wednesday and Thursday, we're taking those days off. But otherwise, 4 p.m. Eastern time throughout this weekend. We get the Big Ten live show coming up on a Tuesday. So keep that in mind, that the Big Ten live show is all new with myself and Corey Bratta, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time right here. Got a call coming in from our buddy Michael Hogue. Michael, how you doing today? Hello, Michael.
I'm here. I just had to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
No, not bad. I was kind of hoping I could have gone on there with Phil, but hey, maybe next week, maybe you can have it to where we can talk with Phil and stuff like that. But no, I can't wait something like that. And I'm trying to figure out this. Is he more on the Big 12 this year or the Big 10 compared to the SEC as he had been in the past?
Is he more on the Big 10 or the Big 12?
Yes.
As being the better conference?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think there's any question that I don't remember exactly seeing this in his publication, but I'm pretty safe in saying that the Big 10 is better than the Big 12, and that Phil Steele has that opinion as well.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, is he more pro Big 12, Big 10 than SEC?
Pro Big 12, Big 10. I don't understand the question, Michael.
Is he okay? What I'm asking,
he can't play favorites. He's not a fan. He's not biased. That's what you're asking.
Does he think the Big 12 and the Big 10 conference is going to do better this year than the SEC? That's what I was wanting to ask him.
Why are you lumping the Big 12 and the Big 10 together?
I don't know, because I got feeling.
I don't know either. I don't understand. Okay, each individual conference, I think he's got a listing in here in regards to who he anticipates to be the best conferences in college football.
Mm-hmm. I haven't got the magazine yet, and hopefully I can get it soon. Knock on wood here, but we'll see.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not going to search through the magazine, but you have anything else for us, Michael?
Other than that, I just can't wait till tomorrow night to razz Corey and stuff like that, and get his take and stuff as far as how I was going to do this year and stuff like that. Is this the year the offense finally wakes up from the slumber?
Yeah, well, they've got most of those guys gone, especially the offensive coordinator who was responsible for much of that slumber, and they were much improved with Tim Lester as the offensive coordinator last year. They moved up like 25 or 30 spots in the offensive metrics. So, Yeah, I do expect Iowa's offense to be better. Now, they've got a more difficult schedule than they've had to deal with in quite some time because of the integration of the Big Ten and the 4 teams coming in from the West Coast. So that's going to be a question mark. And the health of Mark Gronowski. Now, he's supposed to be fully cleared and fully healthy, but he did have shoulder surgery and has not practiced with his team until about a week from today.
Okay, one last thing before I go. Drew Alar, Luke Altmaier. You got to pick one to win the national championship for you this year. Who do you think it will be?
Which team is going to win the national championship?
No.
Or if I just had one quarterback to put on my team?
One quarterback leading your team to win the national championship this year.
Well, Michael, that's actually a good question because we know who is going to be the more successful. We are pretty certain who the more successful quarterback is going to be because he plays for a better team. But I do believe that Drew Aller is a more talented, and he certainly projects as a higher NFL draft selection than Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier, if he played at Penn State, would get dissected like Drew Aller does. Luke Altmaier had an excellent year, I believe 22 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions last year, but those are pretty comparable to Drew Aller's statistics at Penn State as well. Aller's a more gifted thrower, but that's a pretty interesting quarterback comparison.
Yeah, I agree with you what you said, but part of me leans more towards Altmaier because it seemed like Aller can't get there when you have the big opportunities.
And how many big opportunities has Luke Altmaier seen?
Not as many.
Try 0. If you're talking about truly playing in big games that mean championships, 0.
Yeah,
so
but what's
it's kind of tough to make that comparison.
Oh, except for last year.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm just dissecting and stuff like that. But I'm trying to think who's the quarterback going to be for Oregon this year.
Dante Moore.
All right. Just wondering stuff like that. All right, sir. I will catch you. Are you going to be on in a couple hours still?
No, I am not.
All right. So
this is our show today.
All right. I will catch you tomorrow then.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. I was searching here for Phil Steele's NFL draft projections on quarterbacks. I believe he's got Drew Aller as the 6th rated quarterback in the country, not as a collegiate player, but as an NFL draft selection. Let's see where he's got Luke Altmaier. So he's got Aller at 6 and Luke Altmaier at 17. And again, that doesn't have to do with his projection of what kind of season they're going to turn in as college quarterbacks this year, but as NFL draft selections. But Luke Altmaier just, we cannot make a critical comparison between those two in regards to the kind of competition they've faced, the type of situations, the impact of the games, and how much has been at stake for Luke Altmaier versus Drew Aller. We can compare them as quarterbacks. That's a pretty, as you see, 6th and 17th. And that's just a projection, and things change. Carson Beck, Cam Ward, things can change in one season for sure. So I respect Michael bringing that to the table in regards to a quarterback comparison on the field in terms of their skill sets, their effectiveness. And, but in terms of what Drew Aller has faced, if Luke Altmaier was in that position, we would know a lot more about Luke Altmaier than we currently know, even though this is going into his 3rd starting season. He just has not played in high-stakes games. Drew Aller has. So let's just officially read the Deion Sanders story, even though we've got the result in the conclusion, and that is most important. I just would like to see this to give it its due for sure. All right, Colorado coach Deion Sanders says he has beaten bladder cancer. University of Colorado football coach Deion Sanders announced Monday that he had undergone surgery to remove his bladder after doctors discovered a tumor there. Sanders said since the surgery, there are no traces of cancer, and he will continue to coach this season. See, this rides in the face of so many irresponsible people on social media that automatically just say, oh, it's Deion Sanders. He's faking these health situations because he just wants to coach his sons. And as soon as his sons left, he will refuse to coach. After I saw that all over the place. People are pathetic and irresponsible. In a packed touchdown club in the Dow Ward Athletic Center, Sanders appeared with Director of Urological Oncology. We don't have to go through all the specifics. 57-year-old Sanders has largely been out of the public eye in recent months. Deflected questions about his health at Big 12 Media Days and previously had not publicly offered any specifics. And so there was a video posted by his son, and there was some audio overheard. I believe I had seen something about that. He had lost 14 pounds, limited contact around the program during the team's spring and summer workouts. So, yes, I understand the speculation. And in this day and age, there's nothing wrong with the speculation per se, but it was just that people are drawing conclusions before anything's announced, and that is really irritating and annoying to me. We live in a slanderous society. That's all there is to it. I see people get slandered. Shoot, I see myself get slandered about every other day, but it pertains to college football, so who cares? But I see more important topics and people involved in more important topics being slandered every day. And again, it drives me crazy. All right, Jackson, appreciate you being here. Jackson's been a member for 23 months. And of course, Jackson secretly makes everything go here. It all runs because of Jackson. Did not see these super chats, Jackson. I apologize. This year's edition of Utah, similar to 2014 TCU. Also, do you see Oklahoma having a 10-win season under Brent Venables? We got to the Oklahoma portion of that. And Sports Talk with Austin. Austin, we appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Blessed day, Mark. Same to you, Austin. How are you feeling about Louisville's chances to win the ACC? Do you buy into the Georgia Tech hype? Well, I got to admit that I've posted about 30 to 35 prediction videos. And outside of those 30 or 35 teams, I've not really done much of a dive on the others. If I would glance through some Louisville and Georgia Tech rosters right now, it'd probably bring a few things to mind. Of course, Georgia Tech lost its best wide receiver in Eric Singleton. And I don't necessarily buy the hype of either one of these teams, especially Georgia Tech competing seriously for the ACC. I think they'll make things interesting, and I do believe that they are not teams that anyone wants to see on the ACC schedule. But Jeff Brom, I've got all sorts of respect for Jeff Brom. I think he is an underrated coach in college football. I have, since his emergence at Purdue, always ranked him higher than other rankings I've seen out there because I just think he's phenomenal at what he does, building teams, preparing teams, out game planning the opposition, developing quarterbacks, instructing quarterbacks. Shoot, Jack Plummer won a division championship and went to the ACC championship game, I should say, at Louisville. And we can't, of course, ignore the job that Jeff Jenkins. Why do I always say that? Jeff Jenkins was a left fielder for the Milwaukee Brewers in the 1980s and 90s. Jeff Collins has done at Georgia Tech, but still only 7-6 last year. They have yet to break through. A couple 7-6 seasons for Georgia Tech the last 2 years. And yeah, if I have time to do more prediction videos, I will do a deep dive on Louisville and Georgia Tech. It would be a little bit helpful to go through the schedules. So let's look at these schedules for Louisville and Georgia Tech. Meanwhile, we have left the link there in the chat a couple times. If you would like to call, this is taking the place of our 4 p.m. Eastern Time show. Louisville and Georgia Tech, Austin. So let's look at the cards. So we've got, right out of the gate, 3 wins. So Louisville has gone the route of their rival Kentucky and scheduled 3 cream puffs. And then they've got the Kentucky game that they always play at the end of the year. And shoot, why not call it 4 cream puffs? James Madison, though, could give them a fight. Bowling Green could give them a fight, as they did Penn State last year. So let's not completely discount those 3 games. But if Louisville would lose one of those, there are serious issues. They go to Pitt, the worst 7-6 team on the planet last year. Pitt does have a tremendous stock of defensive players, especially at linebacker, coming back to this season. Virginia, they have to win that game at home. At Miami is going to be difficult. That's on a Friday night. Boston College, Virginia Tech, Cal, Clemson, they could go on quite a run. Unfortunately for Louisville, they're playing the 3 best teams in the conference. Clemson at SMU, at Miami. To get to the ACC championship game, they're going to have to go at least 6-2. And that 6-2 is going to have to be a 6-2 where they beat the contending teams that they may have to be matched up on a head-to-head basis. So they've got to pull off an upset or 2. Clemson, Miami. If they lose both of those games, then they are obviously needing one of those teams to get knocked off twice to knock them out, because they'll lose that head-to-head. So stealing one of those 2 games is going to be crucial in the logistics of getting Louisville to the ACC championship game. If they can go to Miami and win that game on a Friday night, or they can beat Clemson at home, which I'm sure is going to be a raucous ESPN game, primetime night game on a Friday night. That's a Friday night game. Louisville playing 2 Friday night games in the span of 5 weeks, and the 2 toughest games of the season. Interesting. That's the key to the season right there. Louisville pulls off 1 out of those 2 between Miami and Clemson, and they could probably even drop another game and still get to the ACC championship game. But if they lose those 2, then they will have difficulty in a head-to-head situation. The ones to look out for other than that is, of course, a trip to Lane Stadium, although I'm not high on Virginia Tech at all this year. Really, other than those 3 games, the schedule is light. The other 5 are pretty light. And then they finish with Kentucky, which, of course, does not impact the standings in the ACC. I believe I've got Louisville going 8-4. I think I'd have to look at my standings here. What do we got for Louisville? I've got Louisville at 9-3, 9-3, 5-3 in the ACC. Keep in mind, the week of week 0, our intent is to do a live stream and stay on here for as long as it takes to go through the entire season, week 0, all the way through, predict every game, tally up the records, figure out who would make the playoff, and go through the playoffs. We might be here for 10 hours doing this. So we will have plenty of this in a few weeks, about a month from now, prior to week 0. Let's look up this Georgia Tech schedule as well. Love this first game. Of course, it's Georgia Tech at Colorado. That's going to be a heck of a ball game. And of course, does not factor into the ACC. They've got Clemson. That's a noon game, though. But they've got Clemson at home. And of course, Georgia Tech has to play Clemson every year. That's one of their designated rivalry games. At Wake, Virginia Tech at Duke, Syracuse. That's a light slate right there. Whoa, 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 whoa. Look at this. Georgia Tech does not have to play Miami or Florida State, and I know that they've had good success against Miami in recent years. But still, no Miami, no Florida State, no SMU. Look at this run of games for Georgia Tech after they play Clemson. At Wake, Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, at NC State, at BC, Pitt. And again, they could drop 2 out of conference games and still be in the ACC championship game and go to the playoff. They could be 7-1 in the ACC, lose 2 games outside the conference, finish 9-3. Where did I have Georgia Tech? I may have to revisit that one. 8-4, 5-3 in the conference. Lose to Clemson. And I don't know after that. At Duke, I may amend that to 6-2 and 9-3. I think they're going to go out to Colorado on opening night and win that game. I'm a little scared of my week 1 predictions. The way I'm looking at them right now is I've got a lot of road teams. I like a lot of road teams. I like Notre Dame going to Miami and winning. I like Texas going to Ohio State and winning. I like this Georgia Tech team going to Colorado and winning. I even kind of like LSU going to Clemson and winning. But of course, that's another thing we'll have to figure out. My predictions and how we will release those this year. You had to be a premium member here or on Patreon last year. But of course, that paid off in the playoffs when I hit 11 straight picks. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for being here for the Phil Steele interview. If you missed it or only caught the end of it, you can just rewind the tape and watch the entire interview with Mr. Phil Steele. And if you heard the end of the interview, you heard Phil say he'd like to come back next month. So that would be phenomenal. So we can do that. All right. Elsewhere here at the Voice of College Football, you will see me show up at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the Miami show with Cam Underwood from State of the U. So again, our Miami show this week is going to be in just about an hour on the Miami channel with myself and Cam Underwood. So check us out at 3 Eastern and enjoy your day of college football. We'll be back here Tuesday at 4 Eastern. Then we've got the Iowa show at 5 Eastern and the Big Ten Live show at 6. And also another round of Michigan podcasts with Steve Dace on Tuesday as well. You guys enjoy your Monday.